Good afternoon, everyone. It's now 2 o'clock by my watch, and it's time to open the hearing session this afternoon for matter 9, which concerns the matters of balanced neighbourhoods and district residential needs. For anyone who's not been participating in the examination before, my name is Phil Milam and my colleague is Kevin Ward. We are the inspectors appointed by the Secretary of State under Section 20 of the Planning Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 to carry out the independent examination of the Folkestone and Hythe District Core Strategy Review. As you probably already know, the Programme Officer for the examination is Caroline Williams, and she'll be present for all of the hearing sessions. And Caroline, just the obligatory check that you can see and hear me okay?
Yes, everything's fine, thank you.
Thank you. As Caroline has probably indicated to you as you joined during the lobby, we would prefer it if everyone can keep their cameras switched on so that we're all visible on the screen, and we've got a manageable number of participants this afternoon to do that. But otherwise, keep your microphones on to mute unless you're speaking. However, if you don't wish to keep your camera on all of the time, please feel free to turn it off. And if you want to make your contributions without switching your cameras back on, that's equally fine. So before we proceed with the opening announcements, I think just for the benefit of everyone, if it would be useful for the council's representatives and then other participants to introduce themselves one by one and just make sure that everyone can be seen and heard. So if I can start with the council's representatives, please.
Sir, good afternoon. My name is Paul Shadarevian, QC, and I represent the council.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is David Whittington. I am the Strategy and Policy Senior Specialist for the District Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Adrian Tofts, and I am the Lead Specialist for Strategy with Folkestone Hythe District Council.
Thank you. And again, just I know there's some other representatives from the council, but I'm guessing that they're not intending to play a speaking role, purely listening in on the session this afternoon.
Unless needed, sir, yes.
Indeed, yeah, and those people introduce themselves at the appropriate time. Splendid. So moving down my list of other participants, Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, sir. Yes, Jamie Roberts here at Tetlow King Planning, representing Rent Plus UK Limited.
Thank you. And, I can see next on my list, Mr. Barrett.
Good afternoon, sir. Mark Barrett from the Home Builders Federation.
Thank you. And in terms of other participants, I've got Mr. Good.
Good afternoon, sir. Matthew Good, Pegasus Group on behalf of Nichols Properties and Camel and Hyde Limited.
Thank you very much. I think that's everyone. I don't think I've missed anyone out. So just to remind everyone that the guidance notes for the examination were issued in May, and they set out the background to the examination and the hearings, and all of the documents relevant to the examination are available on the council's website. Guidance notes for the virtual hearings were issued recently, and please also bear these in mind along with the relevant privacy notice. An agenda for this afternoon's session has been produced, and hopefully you will have a copy. It should be on the website if you haven't yet found that. So we will work through the agenda in order, so please wait until the appropriate time on the agenda to make your points. Once we've dealt with a particular issue, we'll move on and we won't be returning to it. So please make sure you cover all the points you want to make at the appropriate time. And again, please be as focused as you can when speaking and avoid simply agreeing with other participants or repeating any points you've already made. So we've got quite a bit to get through, and we want to make the best use of the time put aside for the session this afternoon. During the session, we will often be directing questions to the council, but we'll give others the opportunity in relation to the representations you've made on the core strategy to put your points over in full. We'll typically ask the council to respond to particular points you may have made before we move on to the next item. Another plea, please can you only speak when asked to do so, and unmute your microphone when speaking, but otherwise, as I have that turned off. And we'll only have one participant speaking at a time. And if you wish to speak on a particular item, please use the raised hand facility and we'll get round to you. I can see a hand from Mr. Shadarivian at this point. Is there anything you wanted to come in on now, or is that a legacy hand?
No, it's a couple of admin points when you've finished introducing the issues.
Thank you. Just sort of finally, please do not attempt to introduce or share documents, and don't use the chat function available in Zoom. If we require any additional documents, we'll ask for them and they'll need to be sent separately to the programme officer. If you have any technical difficulties or any issues in terms of your connection that can't be resolved, please contact the programme officer and we will endeavour to try and assist as best as possible. And also, can you make sure that phones or other devices are either turned off or put onto silent during the hearing sessions? You may wish to also minimise the number of devices on your Wi-Fi just to make sure that all of those can cope with the bandwidth of a meeting of this nature. We will attempt to take a break at an appropriate point during the session, and at that point, if you can turn your camera off and mute whilst you're having a break, but don't log out of the meeting session, that would be appreciated. And also, please make sure that you're ready for any resumption promptly at the time we specify. All of the sessions are being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel, which can be accessed via the link on the Council's website. And I can see the button in the top corner of my screen that says we are live now. So before we go any further, did anyone have any queries on format or otherwise? And if not, I'll come to Mr. Shadarivian's admin points.
So thank you. This morning we discussed possible changes to SS1 with respect to Lydd Airport. And we understood this morning that we had agreed changes to go forward to you for consideration and for discussion with interested people. It seems that the form of wording we thought was agreed wasn't. So Lydd have now put in their proposed wording, which we will put onto the examination website for consideration in this afternoon. There's nothing I should say now that I've had a look at the proposed wording from the promoters, and subject to a couple of adjustments, I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is in relation to the same policy, we've now reached agreement with Magnox about possible policy and supporting text changes in relation to the Magnox power station and its future, which rightfully belong in SS1. And we will again put those on the website this afternoon for future discussion.
Thank you. So just briefly on the airport point, so the revised wording hasn't yet been agreed by both parties, but your initial view is that it is potentially, there is an agreement to be reached in terms of...
Yes, I'm confident we can come to an agreement, but obviously it's subject to the examination and to your views. So it's a matter which the small changes one might propose to it are matters that can be easily discussed. Okay, I think what I was just mindful of is I didn't want to see too many iterations of a similar thing at fairly short notice. So if on the basis that I haven't had time to avail myself of that between this morning and this afternoon session, if there is any possibility to iron some of that out before I have a chance to have a look at it, probably overnight tonight, that would be helpful. All right then. We'll put the representation online anyway, and see if we can come to some agreement about any minor changes to it by tomorrow. Thank you. Right. Thank you for that. So that's helpful. So in terms of this afternoon's agenda, we have a number of sort of two substantive items, one on policy CSD1, balanced neighbourhoods, and another on CSD2, district residential needs. And there are a number of sort of sub points that sit below that. So what I wanted to do is sort of the first part of the discussion is
in relation to the sort of first sub-bullets in terms of the evidence on affordable housing needs and the past record in terms of delivery. Now, I'm mindful that I set a fairly sort of high-level initial question in terms of the evidence in that regard, and the council, you've given me a detailed response in your statement. What I wanted to talk about a little bit was just if you can just set out a little bit about your evidence of delivery, because I've noted that you've, between 2009 and 2019, the council has delivered 731 affordable housing units across the district. And sort of linking back to some of the discussion we've had in other sessions, obviously that's potentially been based on figures from the 2013 core strategy, but also the document that would have preceded even that, and in the absence of your site allocations plan. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about that figure. So I'll let you sort of provide me with a response on that before I come in on my next point. Who's taking the lead? That's you, Mr. Whittington.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes, you're quite right. From 2013 onwards, it was taken from the adopted core strategy, which looked at about 100 affordable dwellings per year. Before that, it was the Shepway local plan. Fortunately, I'm not sure exactly what figure that was, as it's quite old, but it was just showing that figure was really just listing over a 10-year period how much we had actually provided. That's roughly equate. I mean, if we're looking at the 100 per year maximum target we're looking at, that sort of equates to about equates to an average of 71 affordable housing provided each year. Delivery has been through both the sort of housing associations and also through Section 106 agreement. Recently, the council has also been proactive and provided new homes as well.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. Yes, I noted that you said potentially 200 units would be delivered up to 2024 from the council's housing revenue account. This is one of those sessions where I use HRA in those terms, not the Habitats Regulations Assessment. But,
yes, that's correct.
Indeed. So I suppose my question is, of that, what's been delivered so far, if you know, from the council's HRA programme?
I have to just double check. I don't know offhand, I'm afraid. I'd have to double check with our housing people with that one. Sorry.
Yeah, I did have sort of a couple of questions, because obviously what I'm keen to understand is that you said that there's a programme in relation to sort of housing delivery that forms a component of it. And my sort of next question was going to be if I would to understand potentially what's come forward from the HRA account.
Yeah.
But also, what bearing in mind we sit here at the towards the tail end of 2020, what happens after 2024? Is there another program in preparation? Does that have any different targets in it?
I would have to check with our housing colleagues on that one. Sorry, I don't know offhand. I'll just check. Okay. Hello. Sorry about that. I've just been informed that it's very likely that the councillors, with the development of Otterpool, the garden settlement, that the council will be looking to develop around 50 affordable homes per year using that. But I'll double check that with our housing colleagues to just make sure that's correct.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Whitting. That would be useful. It might be useful to just have a very short note on some of those figures to be provided. I think that would assist. Okay. On the basis that we perhaps can't move that point sort of on too much further, what I wanted to then sort of look at was, in terms of the overall housing need per annum, the plan indicates that that's 139 dwellings, and that's referenced in table 5.10 of the SHMA. Forgive me, I'm going to have to find the hyperlink to get to that quicker. And in total, you've indicated over the plan period that would be 2,000. The overall need for affordable homes is 2,640 dwellings. Is that still correct?
That is roughly correct. I think if we're looking over an 18-year period, it's 2,502 around there. But
yes, I was going to say, because the plan, there is a discrepancy in terms of what the plan says in terms of number of
times.
years. We had the discussion yesterday in terms of, notwithstanding our conclusions on the plan period, there is a potential discrepancy with what's in that fact box there, isn't there, in terms of the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that my sort of next point is that I just want to find the right, have a look. Oh, sorry, so when if I appears that I'm not looking people directly, I've got a big screen to my left-hand side with various documents on it. But in essence, that the 139 dwellings figure is based on a slightly different end date. That's to 2033. Is that right in the SHMA? So what you've effectively done is you've taken the annual figure and simply rolled that forward.
That is correct.
Okay. But aligned to that, in terms of how that 139 dwelling target has been arrived at, I just want to find table 10. Sorry. So those figures are based on the Part 2 SHMA, and those are themselves based on the percentage of 35% of households' gross income to be spent on rent in order to generate, as part of the inputs to that calculation, is how to arrive at that figure. Is that right?
That sounds reasonable. I'm just trying to, which table are you looking at? 5.10, did you say?
Yeah, table 5.10 effectively sets out the results of
that's correct. Yeah,
the model. I'm just going to try and find on the reference to where I had it bookmarked, but I've misplaced it, I'm afraid. I just have the reference handy, but I've mislaid it. Sorry. I'll try and reduce the volume of dead air in the discussion again. But essentially, there was the plan is based on the 35% gross income spent on rent, but there was separately effectively a sensitivity test that was based on utilising 30% of gross income to generate the overall figure. So my sort of simple question is, what was the justification for using the 35% gross income compared to the alternative of 30?
Sorry, I'm just reading the documents.
So the page I've managed to find my reference. If it assists, it's on page 46 of the.
Yeah,
of the
sorry.
slide.
I have found it. I'm just trying to see where normally these documents had the reasoning beneath it. Sorry. Which is also, it says the impact. The paragraph 5.36 of the SHMA Part 2 actually talks about the impact of adjusting this affordable threshold is considered in 5.14, where the cost of the housing would constitute more than 25 and 30% of gross house rather than 35. The table indicates that the net increase would be 139 to 230 if 30% gross would be used. I'd have to, it's a while since I've seen this.
Do you want to just take a couple of minutes to
If that's right, sorry.
gather your thoughts rather than continuing with the radio approach of too much dead air space?
Yeah.
Do you want to just take 5 minutes? Would that be? If
sorry.
you need more than that, let me know. But if that's if you think that's sufficient, that's fine. Do you want?
I think the explanation will be there.
Do you want to come back at? Do you need 8? Do you want to come back at past?
Yes, if we may. Sorry about this. Okay,
that's absolutely fine. Okay, everyone, what we'll do is we'll take a short adjournment until 2:30, just to allow time for the council to think on those points, and we'll come back promptly at 2:30. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. The session's resumed. Mr. Whittington, do you want to update me on where you got to in terms of my previous question?
Okay, do apologise for this. Okay, the 35 has been used. If you look to, if you go to the SHMA Part 2, affordable housing, paragraph 3.18 sets out the analysis of housing market gaps, and that talks about I hope I got the right one. Yeah, about a housing market gaps analysis was developed to allow comparison of the costs, and through that work, it talks about that the approaches assume that a household spends no more than 35% of the gross household income of rent, and that's where the consultants obviously came up with the 35 rather than the 30.
Okay, so in effect, that's the maximum amount that they consider is appropriate to be spent on on those costs. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I didn't have any other further specific questions now that you've managed to direct me to that. But at this point, it's probably appropriate to open it up to other participants if anyone has any points they wish to raise in terms of the evidence on needs, past record and delivery, bearing in mind that obviously there's still some further information on delivery that we'll need to pick up separately. No, I don't see a flurry of hands. Okay. Which sort of brings me on to the sort of second bullet in terms of the agenda, and it's sort of titled "What's the basis for the site size thresholds and the proportions of affordable housing?" So I'll sort of cut straight to this one. Is can you take me through what the basis is for the 22% requirement for affordable housing set out in CSD1?
Sorry. Okay, the 22%, the basis of that came through the SHMA work part 2, which considered the obviously went through the process set out in the PPG, as well as their own methodology, and also through consultation with providers and housing people. If I go just run through what the stages were at, they went through the sort of looked at the current unmet need for affordable housing, then newly arising affordable housing need based on projections, then the current housing supply, and then looked at the future housing supply with regard to the different types of housing. So that's how the 22% came about.
So, so in terms of what I was trying to sort of understand really was whether it was sort of taken from ultimately sort of past trends in delivery. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. I think part of the sort of the methodology, looking into it, does look at past trends and projecting them forward. And I think that's sort of set out in part 5 of the SHMA part 2 or section 5, affordable housing need.
Yes, but it sort of then sort of brings me back to if part of that is developed from a historical position, and that historical position is based on effectively a plan of a certain point in time, without the benefit of what is now a very recently adopted places and policies document, i.e. allocations. Is there a potential that's being artificially constrained in any way?
I think they are just following guidance. Bear with us one moment. planning practice guidance, for example, housing, looking for housing needs of different groups. They do, I can't find it now, but that does look to, where is it? Yeah. Oh, I've lost it. Sorry, I thought there was. I'm sure there's a bit which was talking about looking back over the 3 years of what was of need for affordable housing rather than housing being provided. Sorry, it's the need for affordable housing. Those number of people who've requested affordable housing and then projecting that forward.
Okay, so it's based on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I've lost it.
Okay, take your time if you need to find it. It's going to the same point. But the SMART conclusions talk about the 139 per year, that then being 23.2% of projected requirements, 2014 and 2033.
5.25, the paragraph in the SHMA talks about the future supply of social affordable housing, rented housing, and that looks at 3 years of affordable housing. The last 3 years core data provides an indication of number of lettings in the social rented affordable housing rented sector, and the results of the last 3 years are presented in the average number of lettings across the social and affordable rented sector was 382. So I think that's been used in the sort of future supply.
So that's been used in future supply.
Yeah, as a future housing supply. If you go back to table 10, 5.10.
Yes, I've got that. I've got 5.10 in front of me. Yes, I see. So that's under stage 4.
Mm-hmm.
Those figures were based on data from 2012, 2013, and 2014, and so you simply projected those forward. Is that right?
Well, I think it will accumulate in the final figure of 139, which was considered to meet the need for the plan per year.
But is that information still sufficiently current to enable that calculation to be robust, and therefore the overall percentage requirement to be justified?
Looking at, looking at it's rather similar. Sorry, we did do some work on this, and if I could find it. It's let's see. Sort of the current need was very similar, about 1,700. The projections, stage 4, looking at years 18, 19, 17, 18, and 16, 17, the average was 287. So it's slightly down, but it was similar. So I think each
398 are that similar, but
yeah, sorry. But I think if it's looking at each of the years, I mean, if we were to do this every year, I'm sure there would be a different figure. As and when there's some years, for example, completions. Oh, that's the needs change for the local population.
Okay, but in essence, your position is that the variances between what's been used under stage 4, and perhaps a more recent figure are not such that casts any doubt in terms of.
I think it's a safer figure to take the work which has been undertaken by the consultants for the future. I mean, each time we could do it each year, and each time it could change depending on the amount of people requiring homes. I mean, it could go up even more with the current situation as well.
Or would a longer term trend have been more useful in terms of supply?
Possibly, but I think they're just following government guidance.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that's clarified a few matters that I had. Does anyone else have any questions on what we've discussed so far? I wait. I'll wait Mr. Ward's question with interest. Mr. Ward.
Thank you. Just in terms of the 22% policy requirements, I'm just looking at the green box on page 117 of the core strategy review, affordable housing delivery, which seems to indicate that figure of 22% was calculated by taking 139 per annum need for affordable housing, and then projecting that over the whole plan period to give 2,640, and then that in simple terms comes out at 22% of the total the overall housing provision in the plan period. There obviously is a question which was picked up before in terms of the start date for that. There may well be a question in terms of the overall figure, obviously, but so that's I'm correct in saying that's in essence how the 22% figure comes into the plan. But if we turn to policy CSD1, look at the different size thresholds and what the affordable housing requirement would be. It's not 22% in each of those cases, but I suppose that the critical question here is the green box on page 117 talks about obviously discounting smaller sites, and it uses the term windfall development. I was just wondering what the relationship between that definition is and the thresholds in policy CSD1. So is it the case that when you refer to windfall development, so you take the total amount of housing that's expected or required, and you discount in effect small sites which you would not apply an affordable housing requirement on, that leaves you with a net figure which you then get 22% from. But is there a direct relationship between that definition of windfall development and the thresholds that are in policy CSD1? So for example, it talks about in the AOMB requirement for one or contribution equivalent to one affordable housing for schemes of 6 to 10, and then elsewhere it talks about a requirement for 2 affordable dwellings on schemes of 11 to 14. So as I said, there are differences in the percentages, potentially at least there. So I'm just wondering what the relationship between what the policy actually says and the green box on the previous page, which seems to illustrate a simpler way of getting to 22%, I suppose. Yeah.
You are right. I'll just double check with my colleagues. The 22% is based on the 15 or more dwellings. I think it gets it's harder to identify how many units will be coming forward on the smaller sites due to any sort of viability issues. So we stick to the larger percentage, larger sites for 22%, which is, I think, where the 22, when we're looking at the green box, that's where it comes from.
Okay. Would that not mean then that policy CSD1 would be requiring affordable housing provision or a contribution to affordable housing on smaller sites, and that would be providing more than overall, it would be providing more affordable housing than there is a need for, if there is a thing. Yes.
I mean, technically yes, but obviously there's viability issues which come into this, and not all over 15 dwellings would be providing the full amount of 22%.
Yeah.
So it's yes, technically it would be more than the requirement, but there's always that issue that not all sites would be providing. Obviously, the figures we've given you over the 10-year period, as I said, for the 100, if we're looking at 100 dwellings per year, we only got 70 of those 100 dwellings based on the larger sites. So on the 100, well, that would include all sites actually. But.
Okay, I suppose that the conclusion of that then is that the 22% requirement in the third bullet point of the policy is not an exact science, as it were, in terms of whether that's going to achieve the full. You have an unknown quantity of sites that would not prove to be viable.
Well, I mean, if I mean, we've if we look through the bits of paper. There we go. I mean, if we're looking at the amount garden settlements providing, the amounts that the place and policies local plan is providing, with and without percentages, then at 22% we should be meeting the requirement. Then obviously you have to look at there's settlements as well, smaller settlements in the A and B, and other areas where, you know, if developments are coming forward, it'd be useful to have for placemaking really of those, ensuring that they're socially balanced, and there's availability within those smaller areas as well. So not all larger sites will be coming forward in the smaller villages. So we'll be looking. I think that's where the smaller sites come in as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'd just perhaps take the opportunity to leap ahead a little bit, but apologies for that. But I suppose it perhaps links with the concern that's been expressed about the reference to a minimum of 22%. Because, as you say, I mean, I think it's a fair point that when you take account of viability on individual schemes, that's likely to have some impact, and it's likely to bring the overall supply down. But it's an unknown quantity, as you appreciate. Yeah. So perhaps it does. Well, perhaps we'll come back to that point. But it does perhaps flag up an issue with the reference to a minimum of 22%, because theoretically, at least, and I appreciate it's probably unlikely, but theoretically, you could see delivery of affordable housing exceeding the established need, which again would be an unusual situation, but it's theoretically possible, I suppose, if you take that policy literally. You know, you would be looking at 22%.
There are caveats though in the policy before we start reading the bullet points about wherever practical and subject to viability. So where we would be looking for a minimum, where it is viable and practical. So, you know, I think minimum as a wording is suitable there, where it is viable to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Does anyone else have any points on those specific matters at this point? Mr. Berend.
So it is really just coming back to the point raised by Mr. Ward, really, with regard to the minimum. I'm happy to come back to it later on if that's what you choose to do. But I would agree with the point that actually it should be a minimum. It should be setting the target, setting the requirement that developers are expected to deliver, and because that is what the council is expecting to deliver overall. And I think it is important that there's a clarity within the position and with regard to the viability, with regard to the affordable housing delivery, so that developers know what they're expected to deliver. So I think that's one of the reasons why you shouldn't set it as a minimum. It should be set as a requirement for the 22%. And then if there's viability, it will come down. But actually, the council shouldn't be expecting potentially delivering more than that. So it should be really set at that minimum. So it's really just agreeing with the points that Mr. Ward made just then, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, no, I take the point. As I said, but now probably is the right time in the agenda to perhaps have that discussion. But did the council want to make any further response on that in terms of the you've already said? Don't feel compelled to if there isn't one.
Only that I think having a minimum is quite clear for developers, that they do know what they're after. A minimum, I mean, we could have will have 22%, I don't know, but I think a minimum indicates that, that is the bottom we'd go, the lowest figure we'd go to. That they can go higher, which is fine. And because of the caveat in the paragraph preceding that, the viability issue and whether it's practical also comes into it. So it's a flexible policy. I think it's fairly clear what we're after is a minimum. So if we could, I suppose the wording, we could have a very strong wording there saying must be 20%, but I think then that would knock out anything which would go above anyone who's willing to do that. I'm rambling, sorry, but yeah.
That's okay. Mr. Barron, you had your hand in the air next if you wanted to come back on that point.
Sorry. Yes, sir. Thank you. It's not necessarily about it's just about the developer understanding. It's ensuring that actually when it comes to the decision-making process, they won't be expected to deliver more. That there is an expectation that that 22%, if they were to put an application in, that would be acceptable. And it's not then potential to change in the decision-making process. So I think it's just ensuring there's that certainty that is the delivery. If there's viability concerns with regard to a development and there's sufficient evidence to show that it's not deliverable at 22%, obviously that can be open to negotiation, but it shouldn't be the case that or a difficulty. Some of our members have expressed to us the difficulty. You come to a point where actually saying it's a minimum, that there might be an expectation you should be going higher in certain cases. And I think it's just making sure that there's that certainty that you won't be asked to go higher than that 22%.
Yeah, so in effect, you're saying 22% would achieve policy compliance. Anything above that is in effect in excess of compliance. That's your nuts and bolts of your point. Okay. Mr. Ward, you had your hand in the air again.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, just to pursue that point further, really on the question of the minimum. I mean, the evidence that the council has put forward to us and to the examination in terms of affordable housing needs and this policy requirement, and I appreciate there's some issues in terms of whether all sites will deliver, etc. But the evidence put forward, in your view, justifies a 22%. If you achieve 22% of all of the relevant sites delivering affordable housing, that will achieve the affordable housing need. That will meet it. So I suppose it does come back to this question: is there a justification for requiring more than 22%? I can understand the concern that you don't want to achieve less than that, but is there any justification for seeking to achieve more than that? I think you used the phrase, Mr. Whittington, if a developer wished to offer that, or words to that effect, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a justified requirement and a planning policy. I don't see any evidence that you've given us which justifies more than 22%. Is that the case?
Yeah, no, that's okay. Sorry, I was bit flippant earlier. It's just with the
No,
minimum.
I didn't mean to suggest you've been flippant. Sorry.
I know I was probably.
I was just referring to the point you made that
Yeah.
it reflects how the policy might be viewed and implemented.
Yeah.
That, if it's a requirement, it's a requirement, and that needs to be justified.
Yeah,
and that's fine. But anything more than that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Sorry, I think I was saying I was a bit flippant earlier. Sorry. But,
okay. Okay. I mean, we'll perhaps give you an opportunity to ponder that particular aspect of the policy, but I think it's certainly something that we'd like you to think about in terms of how that's expressed as a minimum or not. But yeah, thank you. I'll try and keep quiet now. Sorry.
That's it. That's it. We have no mechanism to pass a post-it note between us, I'm afraid. You are seeing the exchange of post-it notes live on camera. So at this point, Mr. Shadarigian, you have a hand up.
Yeah, you can't see me because the program officer won't let my face be shown, I'm afraid. I'll try to get my video working, but I'm not allowed to.
Oh.
For some reason. It says unable to start video because the host has stopped it. Right.
Oh,
there we are. Am I on? I'm on.
Just to apologise, that was not done intentionally. That obviously, when you joined, I didn't press the right button. So there we go.
Caroline, I wouldn't blame you if it was intentional.
Not at all.
I was just going to say it's really in essence, the requirement is a function of several things. It's a function of need. It's also a function of viability. Expressed as a minimum actually makes no practical difference, whether you express it as a percentage, a fixed percentage, or as a minimum of, unless there were specific justification for requiring more, which was based in policy, and there is nothing in policy to require anything more than the 22%, then I think actually it's just a word which doesn't add anything and could easily be taken out.
Okay. Well, I think my colleague sort of suggested you perhaps ponder on the discussion and the merits or otherwise of that word. So perhaps we'll leave that thought with you.
Right. All I'm saying is I don't think it has any consequences either way, because there's no policy justification or basis for seeking anything more than the required percentage.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think that's probably sort of covered a fair bit of ground in terms of the percentage. So if nobody had any further comments that they wanted to raise on that specific point, perhaps we'll move along a little bit. The next sort of point down the agenda was what effect the policy would have on the viability of development proposals, and what is the evidence in this regard. I think, Councillor, if you could just sort of respond to that point first, then I've got some sort of supplementaries in terms of viability that I want to pick up on. Mr. Whittington, is that you in the first instance?
I'll endeavour to do so. Okay. I mean, with regard to this, it's a policy which was carried over with the change in the percentages from 30 down to the 22. That work was recently the 30% was recently tested under the Places and Policies Local Plan and was found sound. We've done additional work following your request with Gerald Eve, testing sites, the existing sites, again with these policies, and that document is EB 03.89, and those sites came out viable, so that's where the basis of the viability comes from.
Thank you. I'm just mindful that assessment looked at the specifics of sites rather than it wasn't what I would call a typology model using theoretical sites. It appeared to use sort of quasi-actuals. Is that right? But there were various elements that were sort of redacted within that.
I'm not sure if it was. The as far as I thought they did test actuals.
Sorry, yes, it was based on actuals rather than
yeah, it was looking at an actual development site, the allocations, and then testing to see whether that 22% would make those sites unviable, along with other policies, I believe. I'll just double check.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hello. Yes, it was based on individual sites, and section 2 of the Gerald Eve report sets that out, and sets out the fact that the policy SD 1 and 2 were tested through that.
Yeah, so but one of my sort of issues with the viability work is that did that viability work look at the effect on smaller sites? As I noted that the majority of sites, with the possible exception of the Hope All Saints Garden Centre site, all appeared to be quite significant in size. And I'm just mindful that obviously you've got within bullet 3, you've got a requirement on schemes of sort of 15 or more. But was there any viability testing done of schemes at the lower end of that range?
Hello, sorry. Just double checking. The Gerald Eve work didn't look at smaller sites, but the places and policies local plan, which was tested and which has been adopted, that the viability work for that tested smaller sites against 30% affordable housing of the old policy. Hence why we didn't test it this time around, because that was found viable on a greater amount as well.
Okay, I understand. I suppose what I'm getting at is that we haven't again got anything submitted within the evidence base of this examination that clearly sets out your position in that regard. I think you've clarified it now, but we don't obviously have the benefit of having a viability work that looks at specifically at the percentage requirement that you've embedded within there. So obviously you said a higher amount can be tested, but I think it might be useful if that position was put forward.
Sure, we can put that back up on the website. Okay, would that be okay?
Yes, I mean, I think as I say, we need to make sure that obviously what we've got in front of us, and if you're relying on that evidence base as your justification to say that those requirements are viable, then obviously we need to ensure that that there is evidence base in front of this examination that effectively shows that, or shows what your position is on that. Okay, I just wanted to sort of skip back in just in terms of the contributions. I just wanted to clarify, and it's a fairly simple point, that in the first sort of bullet under CSD1, you talk about financial contributions to affordable housing within the AO and ONB area. Is that on the grounds of practicality or something else?
I believe it is. practicality. It was carried over from the previous plan, as you've probably gathered, and yeah, it's on practicality on the smaller sites.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, I did want to just change my notes. Just sort of going back to the overall sort of viability assessment. I think one of the things that I noted was that the Section 106 costs didn't appear to be individually identified. Was there a reason for that? If they're based on actuals? Don't know. I'm presuming you're having an internal discussion on that.
Yeah, I might need an internal discussion on this one. Then. Introduce you. I'm just going to pass you over to my colleague James Hammond, who dealt with the
yes.
viability. Sorry, thank you.
That's fine.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Whittington. So the individual infrastructure items as specified through the Section 106 that were secured against each of the strategic sites, they're set out in turn in under matters 5 and 6. Specified in detail, and the Section 106 heads of terms were provided to Gerald Eve as part of the background evidence to their viability work. So they would have been appropriately captured.
So you're saying that they have been captured, or it's just that they didn't appear to be anything sort of specifically itemised in some of them, it just sort of had Section 106 and SIL costs. And I'm presuming you've got I just wanted to make sure those things were taken into account. As I say, nothing was separately itemised. It was quite difficult to sort of read back through to understand what had been included and or not included.
We can take conference our end and provide a supplementary note, but all of that information is readily available and has been put forward to Gerald Eve as part of their work.
Yes, I mean on the basis if it's information that's taken from effectively Section 106 that are completed and in the public domain, then I don't see any necessary reason why they should have been redacted or otherwise held back. So it was just important to gain that understanding. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I've probably covered my questions in terms of the securing of affordable housing in the AO and B area and the financial contribution. I suppose my sort of remaining question is that sort of you've got the separate thresholds within the policy in terms of 11 to 14 and 15 or more units. We sort of talked a lot about the overall percentage, but how were those particular thresholds arrived at?
Sorry, the thresholds were set out. They arrived. They'd been carried over from the previous local plan core strategy. So it had worked in the past, and it was really looking at providing a contribution which was considered fair at the time with the sizes of developments.
And again, I sort of come back to my sort of central point around this sort of roll forward approach. I mean, again, I don't know if we've got all of that evidence in front of us in terms of if you're relying on that again as the basis for your response to this examination, because obviously what I'm keen to understand is, are there any viability implications particularly around the thresholds for affordable housing on those smaller sites? And have they been sort of sensitivity tested in any way? And is there any evidence of that?
Okay, we'll endeavour to get that to you. I believe with regard to the, again, PPLP, which looked at sites of 5 or more, those sites were tested viability. So the viability wise, they should be satisfied. But I shall try and pull out the reasoning why the review, the previous plan, split those sites, the sizes. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I think that would be useful. Does anyone have any points on thresholds at this point, or anything we've just captured in the last sort of part of the discussion? So yeah, Mr. Berendt. Mr. Berendt, you have a hand raised. I don't know whether you. Oh, there you are. You'd frozen temporarily. I think you might still be on mute, Mr. Berendt. I don't know if it's a.
Sorry, yes, I've just been informed my internet connection is unstable, so apologies if I freeze. In terms of the viability, I think, like you, Sarah, it's just having the evidence in front of us, especially considering we're moving into. We've got the 2019 MPPF and the importance placed on viability testing at the plan making stage. So I think it's just important having the evidence there, which is the point that we made in our representations. I think it's just another point with regard to the wording of the period in terms of it talks about development of 6 to 10, but also land capable of accommodating that level, which is a position I was uncertain as to why that was there, in terms of if according to the if in line with the 2019 MPPF a site is making the most effective use of that land as is required, then actually there's no need for a separate assessment as to whether that site could accommodate further development. So again, it's just an uncertainty within that particular wording that I don't think is particularly necessary. And again, in terms of the decision maker, how the decision maker would respond to that, it feels slightly ambiguous.
Did the council want to come back on that point? Is this something in relation to what I would perhaps refer to as any sort of artificial subdivision of sites? Is that where this is intended?
That's what it's intended to deal with. So if you have a site which qualifies for that number of dwellings, and someone's coming forward with a very, very low density, then this attempts to capture the loss which would otherwise be made if it were not there in the policy.
Yes, and I presume sometimes it's often referred to as part of a wider and contiguous site, something along those sort of lines as well. So that's,
yes, as well. That as well. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I understand the point. Okay. Did anyone have any other further points in that regard before we sort of move on slightly? No, I don't see any nodding or shaking of heads. Okay. I just wanted to briefly sort of then move into discussion around the tenure split in terms of obviously you've got the requirement in the policy for where 15 or more dwellings are proposed, it's 30% affordable housing shall be shared equity and 70% affordable rent and social rent. So my question was a fairly simple one, is what the basis for those figures are, and are they justified?
Okay, thank you. Again, if this is work which has come out from the SHMAR Part 2, Table 4.3 within Section 4 of that document sets out how the tenure identifies that identifies that split. So it's the work which was undertaken for the SHMA.
Sorry, what was it? Table 4.3.
Great. Yeah.
Let's go to the tables. I've got links in. Understand. And that's placed on there. Okay. Yeah, I've made a note that there were sort of different costs associated with full social rent in terms of national rent regime and affordable rents, and I think you'd indicated that you were doing some further work on that point as well. Is there any update on that? I think I picked that out from your statement. Yeah, let me just find the reference. I think I may have already answered myself in terms of the further Gerald Eve work.
Okay.
Set aside that one for the moment, unless I have another moment of clarity and come back to that. So just in terms of the tenure split, do other participants have any comments in that regard? I can see Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, and thank you, sir. So our hearing statement on behalf of Rent Plus, I suppose this is the core of our case for this examination, is in terms of the tenure split. Would it help if I gave you just a very brief intro to what Rent Plus is and why they're interested in this examination?
If you could be fairly succinct, yes.
Absolutely. So in 2018, the framework was revised and the definitions of affordable housing were expanded, and this is set out at Annex 2, where you went from the old style of affordable rent and intermediate housing to a more granular approach, where you now have this approach, Category D, as we call it, which is the other affordable routes to home ownership. This lists a number of different schemes, including the traditional shared ownership product, but also the rent to buy product, which is a relatively new and innovative product that's recently come to market, as it were. And it's something that national policy was revised to support. Rent Plus is a leading provider of rent to buy homes. They have a particular model. Essentially, it works on the basis that you rent a home from Rent Plus. Typically, tenants are drawn from a housing register. They rent that home for a period of time. And unlike other routes to home ownership, there's a gifted deposit at the end of your set period of rent, which makes it easier, hopefully, to make that leap up into home ownership. So it's clearly one of the other affordable routes to home ownership, but as a side point, and perhaps less relevant for this examination, but as a side point, it also meets the definitions of affordable housing for rent as well.
Thank you.
Does that help provide a little bit of context there for you?
Yes, it did. So in terms of your overall points in relation to the plan, I'm just going to find my summary of your representation. But essentially, your concerns relate to whether the plan effectively adequately provides sufficient flexibility in terms of tenures overall, with specific reference to rent to buy products.
Absolutely. And I think our concerns in that respect are relatively straightforward in that CSD1, as it's presently drafted, is in itself, it's internally inconsistent with some of the objectives in the core strategy. But probably moreover, it's inconsistent with the framework and the up-to-date definitions of affordable housing.
Okay, and so specifically, how do you think the policy is internally inconsistent?
So if we take up paragraph 5.3 of the supporting text, for example, the core strategy states that there is a growing range available to meet individual circumstances. Alongside affordable rented, affordable housing can also include starter homes, discounted market sales housing, and shared equity products, which allow occupiers to staircase up to full ownership. And then there is a footnote to that, which then takes you straight through to the NPPF definition, and that includes a reference there to rent to buy. So that's picked up in supporting text, and similarly that's picked up in the second paragraph of policy CSD1, which discusses a broad range of tenures, and I shan't repeat that, but that does include other affordable routes to home ownership. So then what we have when we come to look at the detailed tenure splits, which is the fourth paragraph below the bullet points, we then have, for development proposing 15 or more dwellings, as a starting point, approximately 30% of the affordable housing provision shall be shared up equity. And I think it's this that gives us a little bit of trouble at the moment, because you've got supporting text and other references within the plan to the whole gamut of affordable tenures. But when it comes to the crunch and the actual tenure split that's being sought, the core strategy is drafted refers only to shared equity, and in our view that kind of means that it's not consistent with national policy, but it's not effective either. What we'd like to see in terms of a remedy, and it's a relatively minor change of words, is just to make sure that reflects the full range of affordable tenures. That gives Rent Plus as an affordable housing provider that allows a little bit more flexibility there, if you like.
Thank you. I think there's probably a good opportunity to bring the council in on those points. So you obviously heard what Mr. Roberts has said in terms of those matters, and perhaps the increased specificity that's included in the supporting text versus what's actually within the policy itself. Do you have any response on those matters?
I mean, I'm not adverse to making small amendments to the description if it is if it's safe to do so. I mean, I'm just wondering, I'd have to double check, make sure the percentage changes wouldn't change due to the change in description. That's all. But I think we would be open to ensuring that particular paragraph reflects the supporting text and the text above, if it's considered necessary.
Well, I think to assist, I mean, it's not the purpose for you to sort of invent a main modification of that nature, sort of on the fly, so to speak. So if you want to take some time to reflect on it, that would be entirely appropriate. But I think you can see there is a potential issue that your supporting text is probably more in line with the framework than perhaps those elements of the policy that have been described. So I think you may need to have a bit of think about that.
if we may, that'd be
Mr. Chair,
please.
do we have a follow up to that, or I haven't got your mic on, I'm afraid. You're muted, I'm afraid.
Apologies.
It's all right.
We will certainly look at it to see if there is any divergence from national policy in having the 30 and 70% split like this. But I'm not quite sure I fully understand. It must be my fault as to what is being proposed here as an amendment.
Sorry, I think the I don't necessarily speak of Mr. Roberts, but I think what he's saying essentially is that the supporting text does explicitly sort of refer to under 5.3 the wider range of types of affordable housing to meet different needs and a range of shared equity products, and particularly those which staircase up to full. But when you actually look at the precise wording in CSD1, it only talks about shared equity and affordable and social rent.
Yeah. Okay, I thought that did actually include.
You've got the other. Sorry, the point in the second paragraph. I think his point is it doesn't also talk about affordable rent. So I think that was, but simply the change that was.
Okay. All right. Let me have a.
Let us comment, Mr. Roberts, if you're.
Yeah, I think if it's any help, then in our hearing statement and Reg 19 reps, we've set out a suggested amendment, which is very simple, and it simply involves striking through the words shared equity and replacing that with affordable housing for sale, or some similar form of wording. I believe HBF have also made a similar suggestion. So it's certainly not a major change by any stretch, and if it provides any further assurance, then other councils recently have proposed similar amendments to their local plans. Runnymede is the one that sticks to mind, where this is done.
Okay, we'll have a look at it.
Take it back and have a.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't make it up on the fly for the sake of it.
No.
Okay, thank you. I think we probably covered a fair bit of ground on this point. And I think we've also covered quite a bit in terms of some of the sort of points around flexibility in the wording within the policy that allows for flexibility. So I didn't have any further points on that, but if participants did, now would be a good time to raise them, because I think once we sort of put that issue, concluded on that issue, perhaps we'll take a short adjournment for a comfort break. So did anyone else have any other points on that first part of the agenda? Splendid. Right. I'm mindful that, as I say, we've been going for a fair while. So would participants prefer a slightly longer break of 30 minutes, or would you want to come back a little sooner than that? I'm flexible, and I'll take a view from everyone.
We're entirely in your hands, sir.
I'm reasonably content to sort of move things along. So perhaps should we just take 20 minutes just for a short comfort break, and we'll return at 10 to 4?
Very good.
Splendid. Mr. Roberts, you've got a hand, is that?
Yeah, just a short question. May I ask if representatives haven't anything to say on the next part, is it possible to leave, or are we advised to remain within the hearing?
That is entirely within your gift, Mr. Roberts. If you feel that you've had full opportunity to make all the points you want to make, I have no objection if you have other matters to get onto. So I shall leave it with you. But if not, I'll just thank you for your contribution if you don't return after the adjournment.
No, I think we've said what we wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity, and just to say thanks also to the council and the programme officer for helping this all run as smoothly as it has done.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, then without further ado, then we'll come back at 10 to 4 then. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 10 to 4 and the hearing session is resumed. This part of the session is going to look at the sort of second element on the main agenda in relation to policy CSD2 in particular. So just sort of a brief sort of reflection back on the earlier discussion, and obviously CSD1 sets out in its sort of 3 bullet points the 3 sort of categories and thresholds against which affordable housing is going to be sought as part of the plan. And moving through into CSD2, there is a threshold which is being inputted into the policy in relation to how the council will look at the mix of dwellings required to be provided. So my sort of simple starter question really is what is the justification for the threshold of 15 dwellings to provide a mix in accordance with this particular policy, and what other approaches were looked at, if any? So Mr. Whittington, you...
Yes, I'll try and answer this one. Really, it was looking at a suitable amount in a development which we could then practically apply the splits. Obviously, if you go too small, it would be fairly complicated, and you'd end up with smaller percentages and so forth. So the 15 seemed a reasonable size to start introducing the split of sites, or split of sizes, sorry.
Okay, so essentially you're saying for reasons of practicality and without having to try and divvy up effectively quite small sites, you felt 15 was the appropriate balance by which...
Yes, I think so, and it's also to make the smaller sites more viable rather than insisting on a certain amount. So, okay,
that's helpful. I think one of the things I sort of just sort of picked up on is that obviously in CSD2 you've got some sort of text in the second bullet around a range of housing tenures should be provided, including owner occupied and private rented and affordable housing in accordance with CSD1. But obviously your second bullet of CSD1 also required on-site provision of affordable housing for schemes of 11 and above. So I think what I was just trying to understand is that why the 15 was selected above 11 potentially, and was there a slight tension there between those two elements?
But yeah, the first two, obviously 15 is also when we're looking at the split in actual on-site affordable as well. You're quite right.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So you've obviously based the percentage on the ranges in the scenario, and you've given those as ranges, and I'm presuming you're going to tell me that's to aid flexibility and to also aid for practicality reasons, so that you don't end up with some quite lumpy, shall we say, percentage requirements for each of the sort of respective sort of bedroom size of properties that you're seeking. Is that a fair summary of the position?
That's fair. Yeah, thank you.
But I suppose sort of overall, have those overall sort of ranges been tested also for viability, or are you going to tell me that that's in the viability report that's coming?
Yes, that's correct. That's in the viability report,
okay,
which we mentioned earlier to Gerald Eve.
Okay, well, I think obviously I need to make sure that we've got a sight of that, and probably at the moment I think it's probably not going to be productive for me to carry on sort of questioning in that regard, as obviously we haven't had the benefit of seeing it. So I think really sort of what I wanted to ensure really was just that other participants have any opportunities to comment on the mix of dwellings being sought and the thresholds at this point before we sort of move along. Mr. Berend.
Thank you, sir. I think in terms of the approach taken in the policy, I think it's difficult to know where to put the threshold, and I think in terms of the HBF, we would like to see that higher in terms of ensuring that there's greater flexibility on those smaller sites. We've suggested a 50 unit threshold to actually achieve a mix, and actually you'll achieve a better mix on the larger sites than you will. It's more difficult to achieve that mix on a smaller range of sites. However, I think what is most important, I think important for us, is that the council doesn't seek to reflect exactly those percentages within development, and actually it seeks that is something the council can have regard to, and developers have regard to that evidence, noting that evidence does change over time. So I think it's having regard to the SHMAR, all the most up-to-date data that's available, whether that's regard to data on need, but also on delivery and what's being delivered in terms of the AMR. So I think it's, for us, the threshold is less important than actually making sure that there is a greater degree of flexibility with regard to the data that's available at the time, and ensuring that the council doesn't strictly adhere to what is set out within the SHMAR, and actually has a more flexible approach to it. So,
thank you. But I suppose by having a range, there is an inbuilt degree of flexibility already. Is that not?
I think there is a degree of flexibility within there, and actually that's something welcome. But I think it is just more the point that the range should reflect the mix identified in the SHMAR, and I think it's just that small point in terms of, rather than reflect, should have regard to the evidence in the SHMAR was a small point that we wanted to make. So.
Okay, yes, and that's related to the sort of second bullet of CSD2, because it says as a starting point, the range should reflect the mix.
Yes, yeah.
Mr. Whittington, did you have I don't know, I've got Mr. Good. Mr. Good, if you've got a point on this to make, perhaps it would be a good opportunity for you to bring that in now, and then perhaps I'll ask Mr. Whittington to respond to both of your points.
Yes, I mean, mine again isn't really about the threshold, so I don't know if you want me to hold on to it until your next bullet point, or I'm happy to take it. Are you happy to take it now? It's more about the flexibility point, which has just been partially discussed.
Well, I think this session is going to be perhaps a little more fluid, so perhaps now's a good opportunity for you to make your point. So,
yes, you'll be aware from our representations in the hearing states, we have made comments on the mix, and we're particularly concerned about that just at this point in time, given the current situation which we find ourselves in with COVID-19 and people reassessing how they wish to live in their current properties. And one of the things I think we need to bear in mind is the SHMAR itself is already, it was published in 2015 or 2016, sorry, even though it says 2017 on the examination website. So we're already 4 years down the line from that SHMAR. It's pre-MPPF. Or at least a 2019 version of it. And whilst we are supportive of there being references in there to viability, practicality, and the SHMAR being a starting point, we then see the ranges in there. Now, those ranges at the bottom and top end are reasonably wide. What we find is there's quite a squeeze in the middle. So if you're looking at market properties, actually only a 5% range in that middle section for 2 and 3 bed. Doesn't necessarily give you a great deal of wriggle room. Your main choice is, do you build more larger houses or do you build more smaller houses? You don't have a great deal of choice over that middle size of properties, and it's that which gives us some concern. And if the policy referred to the SHMAR as a starting point without the reference to those ranges in there and being part of the policy, I think we'd be a lot happier, sir, because what I'm concerned is once you see those ranges there, it does kind of push a decision maker down the line of looking directly to those. And if you're not in accordance with those, given that some sites won't be coming on board for 2, 3, 4 years yet, so we're going to be 7, 8, 9 years down the line from the evidence base, then to my mind, there is a little bit of concern that we might actually be developing the wrong kind of product. Without really understanding what the market is at the point in time of the actual development coming forward. We did have some other points around the affordable as well. Obviously, with the bedroom tax, which you'd be aware of, sir, there is a tendency not to want to go for the higher, larger properties. But likewise, we do question whether 1-bed properties are actually that desirable at the moment. just because of the current issues which we find ourselves in, the need for space, etc. So.
Thank you. Mr. Whittington, did you want to come back on both of the points you just heard?
Thank you, sir. With regard to flexibility, I believe the policy is flexible. I think the key few words there is as a starting point. It should be reflected. So if a few years, I mean, obviously the plan is going to be to 2037 with reviews in every 5 years, subject to any future change in the process. If evidence was provided at application stage that's saying that they'd have to deviate from this because of work which has been undertaken at the time, then that policy allows for that. So I think the policy is flexible. I worry about 50 dwellings or more. We don't have that many allocations in the PPLP which are 50 or above. So I don't think we'd be getting a range of homes which would be needed for the future residents. So I think 50 would be too high for the immediate current situation. But I think they're the 2 points. I can't remember if I've missed any of the other points there, but I think viability was the main thing that, not viability, the flexibility. With the as a starting point, I think it's there in the policy already. Thank you.
Yes, and that sort of middle column covers both 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings as part of that, and there's no further specificity that seeks to break down a particular requirement for 2 and then separately 3 bedroom properties. Is there? There is scope within that range and across those 2 bedroom sizes. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. That sort of answers what I wanted to, just in terms of key questions on the mix, and obviously the viability point, which we'll receive further information on. So does anyone else have any other additional points on that before we perhaps move on slightly? No, I don't. Oh, Mr. Good. Sorry, yes, I can spot a hand there.
Thank you, sir. It's just a quick point, and just in addition, the council did mention obviously that they will seek to review the plan in what currently is every 5 years, is what the NPPF currently says. It's just a pointer that obviously, given that the SHMAR was published in 2016, as I mentioned earlier, 5 years down the line is quite a significant period of time, and you could argue the SHMAR is already out of date, given it wasn't prepared under the current NPPF requirements. I was heartened by the fact that the council mentioned that if other evidence was put forward, then they would consider that. I suppose my only concern with that, the policy doesn't mention that anywhere. So it does mention it as a starting point, but if there is more up-to-date evidence, either by the council or by others, then I fully agree that should be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whittington, did you have anything further to add on that? I think the point's fully clear, and you've set out your position quite clearly in terms of the wording of the policy, and you say that provides sufficient flexibility as to what the council will take into account.
Yeah, no, we have no further points to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I'm clear on sort of respective positions in that regard. So I was going to then sort of move on, and we've sort of, as I said, I did have some points that we were going to perhaps talk about in terms of viability, but I think perhaps we'll need to sort of reflect on what comes through on that before we can take that much further. But obviously, I think overall the policy does, include several references, and across this and CSD1 there are some references in there in terms of exceptions on viability grounds. So from that side of things, we've got that discussion banked. I just wanted to then sort of move on briefly in terms of the elements in the paragraph below the sort of small table in CSD2 around the sort of units for older people. and it was a fairly simple point, because we had the sort of discussion around older people in C2 accommodation yesterday, and so the policy is also looking essentially to the same sources of supply in terms of delivering the specifics of C3B units, which is for residents up to 6 residents together with an element of care. I suppose the question is there a sort of read-through amendment? Is SS2 and CSD2 consistent in that regard? Mr. Whittington, is it?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to remember what was said yesterday. Sorry.
Okay.
I just take just double check with colleagues if I
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry to keep you. We just a quick chat with my colleagues. We feel that it is consistent at the time,
Okay.
at the moment.
If that's the position, yeah, I think like I said, potentially was that obviously if you're looking to the same new sources of supply for effectively,
obviously if any
use classes, whether both of those are adequately reflected across the two classes. If your position is that's the case, I'll take that point and I'll ponder that further.
Okay,
that's helpful. Excuse me. It's finally drying up. Did anyone else have any points in relation to the approach in CSD2 to housing for older people and those requirements? Mr. Good.
Thank you, sir. Yes, once again, you'll see from our hearing statement, we did raise some concerns with regards to this, and unfortunately, I wasn't involved in the conversation yesterday, so I don't know the full details of what was discussed there. So if I repeat anything or cross over anything, then apologies for doing so.
That's fine. No,
I mean, you'll see from our representations, we looked at what the SHMA said in terms of need for older people, which is contained in table 6.2 of that document, page 49 for your reference. That identifies 1279 additional special use units for older people, i.e. the over 75s is the figure that it uses, which is made up of just shy of 1,200 for sheltered accommodation and 82 for extra care. Our client's main concern was that the sources of supply, as we understand it, are the 2 strategic allocations, which would deliver 660 units if those are policy compliant, if they provide policy compliant number of units. That's some way short, sir. And then when we read, and it may be our reading of it, but when we read the policy itself in CSD2, the ABC elements, it does place a fair bit of additional requirements on a developer that's seeking to provide accommodation for older persons. That, to me, doesn't seem right. Given that there is an identified need, surely it should be more of a positively prepared policy. So it talks about over-concentration, it talks around issues such as transport infrastructure, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but then it also has issues around design to provide a high quality of care. Well, that's very subjective. It's not clear where that's come from. All of those, to our mind, make it a little bit harder then to provide this type of accommodation, which the council itself is indicating it sorely needs. It seems a little bit wrong way round in many ways. So it's not, as I would suggest, a positive prepared policy.
Okay. Mr. Whittington, do you have a?
So,
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. I was
no.
That's not the model participants. Yes.
If we look at paragraphs A, B, and C, we can see that they apply to accommodation providing care, and there's no distinction, as it were, in this part of the policy between accommodation for the elderly and accommodation for other groups in the community who are considered to be vulnerable and who need particular types of care. So when one applies these considerations, first of all, A, it doesn't lead to an over-concentration of socially vulnerable people in the neighbourhood. We're not talking here about a concentration of elderly people. One has to have regard to the harm which is trying to be avoided here. And we're talking about creating communities where there are, for example, a large number of younger persons who need care and control to prevent them from committing crimes or getting involved in drugs, etc. And it's that kind of harm which is trying to be avoided here without specifically saying so. So that's applied as a matter of common sense. It makes a suitable contribution as necessary to the community and sustainable transport infrastructure needs associated with the residents. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's saying that you need to ensure that it's sustainable in that sense. And C, it's shown to be designed to provide a high quality of care. We're talking here about land use planning. We're not talking about the way in which the institution is going to organise itself management-wise. It's about the design of the proposal and making sure that it is of a high quality. And again, there's nothing wrong with that as a policy requirement.
Thank you, that's helpful. Mr. Good.
I don't disagree with what's just been said to you, sir. I suppose my main concern is when you read the supporting text, it doesn't mention that in the supporting text. It does talk about older persons. Maybe that needs to be a bit more clearly set out in the supporting text if that is the case. I'm just rereading to make sure I haven't missed anything, and I don't easily pick that up, sir. So it may be a misunderstanding, and if it is, fair enough. But at this stage, I don't think the plan is sufficiently clear in that regard.
So what you're saying is that before the criteria A, B, and C, it says elsewhere residential accommodation providing an element of care in line with the above, and then the above specifically refers to older people. You're saying that's its thrust rather than perhaps the wider.
It is, and so it's also then if. Sorry, sir. It's also then if you read the supporting text below, which does primarily talk, not singularly, has to be said, but primarily talk about older persons. And I say maybe it is our misunderstanding of that situation. But I'm sure if we misunderstand it, others may well do too.
Okay. I suppose the question for the council there is to perhaps you would probably say to me that you don't think there's any ambiguity, but do you think that in light of what's been said that there is potentially some element of clarity that might be added to the supporting text to address the issue? As I say, it might be one for you to have a think about, but
we're quite happy to do that. The supporting text doesn't in any way skew this, as it were, towards accommodation for the elderly. But we can certainly look at it to make sure that when people are considering the policy, they know what kind of harms it is we're seeking to avoid, which we can provide in narrative form in a paragraph in a supporting text, if that is a way forward.
Yes, I think that would be useful.
All right, we'll look at that in that case.
Thank you. Okay. I didn't have any further questions on that particular element. Does anyone else have any other further questions on that specific point? Has everyone explored that? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll move on. Now, we proposed one of our matters, issues and questions, which was, what's the evidence in relation to the accommodation needs for gypsies, travellers and travelling show people? I think really what I wanted to sort of understand was principally the relationship between what the evidence says in terms of need for provision for gypsies, travellers and travelling show people, and how that then relates to vis-a-vis this plan and what's been put forward in the PPLP. Who's coming in for that one first? Mr. Tofts.
Yes, we commissioned a gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment from consultants ARC4, looking at the course strategy review plan period to 2036-37, and during the course of preparation of the Places and Policies local plan, the inspector for that plan directed us to find a site to meet the needs in full, and although it is to a longer plan period than the Places and Policies local plan. So there was a hiatus in the examination of the Places and Policies local plan. We undertook a study of available sites, and we undertook an assessment of them and sustainability appraisal of those sites. We put forward a site to the examination, and during the course of this work, the site was developed, a planning application was put in for it, and the site is complete and is occupied. And so that effectively takes account of the full need to 2036-37. And it was afterwards found sound by the inspector and adopted by the council in September.
Okay, so yeah, so it's been effectively been implemented and is occupied, and that addresses the requirement. I think what I was just trying to ensure was that I think just looking at the GTAA, that the requirement was split over sort of two pitches in one in the period up to 2021-22, and then there were a further two over the remnants of the plan period. And what I was keen to ensure was that anything that potentially wasn't addressed through the PPLP, that the strategic number was captured elsewhere and addressed, so that what we didn't end up with, it was potentially a site not coming forward via another document, and then this as the overarching strategic plan hadn't captured that that strategic number anywhere. But I think you've probably addressed my concern in that regard, if the scheme is actually consented and implemented.
Yes, that's correct. So it was a new policy in the Places and Policies local plan, which was consulted on through main modifications at the end of the process. It is policy RM15, and the allocation for that site provides for the full need to 2036-37, and it is occupied and complete, and the landowners are living on the site at the moment.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I think that probably sets out most of my questions on that. So I think that's probably answered everything that I wanted to in that regard. So we had a couple of sort of supplementary questions on the end of CSD2. Does anyone else have any comments in relation to what's just been said in relation to gypsy and traveller pitch provision? see no hands. I see quiet nodding. Okay. I didn't have any further questions for anyone. I don't know if Mr. Ward and I have not exchanged our virtual post-it notes. So if there are no further questions, I'll have a final call from anyone, including Mr. Ward. But otherwise, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation over the course of today. And we've covered a very significant amount of ground. So unless anyone else has any points in relation to their representations that they feel they haven't had the opportunity to make as part of these sessions, please speak now before I close the session. And I see no hands.
Not from me, thank you, sir.
No, Mr. Good, Mr. Berend, you've covered all the ground you wanted. Thank you very much. In that case, I shall bring this session to a close and thank everyone, and look forward to seeing participants again tomorrow, where we have